The most infamous person to come from Austria is... Oh, wait, sorry, wrong script. Let's run it back. Austria's most celebrated national hero is Andreas Hofer, a pretty regular guy by most accounts. He wasn't born into glory. Actually, he grew up in a pretty regular Tyrolean family and ran an inn in the Passia Valley. Pretty humble stuff. Until history kicked down his door. When Austria lost Tyrol after the War of the Third Coalition, Napoleon handed the region to his allies in Bavaria, who annexed it and imposed conscription on the local population. Hofer either could be conscripted into the Bavarian army or go full metal jacket and rebel. He picked option B, joined the anti-Bavarian resistance, and quickly became its leader. He literally went village to village rallying farmers, hunters, and sharpshooters for an uprising. And, in 1809, it finally kicked off. The Tyrolean rebellion exploded in Innsbruck after rebels dumped sawdust into the River Inn as a secret signal. Church bells rang, peasants grabbed muskets, axes, and whatever they had, and suddenly Bavarian garrisons were being steamrolled. After some very nice victories and a few back and forths with the French army, Napoleon started getting really sick of Hofer and decided he wanted his head. So he put a price on it. After Austria had been beaten again, they stopped supporting Hofer, so he retreated into the mountains, hiding in a hut from the French. Until one of his neighbors betrayed him for money like a true cringe loser. Bro allegedly never even got the check from the French. Good job, moron. Anyway, Hofer was captured, sent to Mantua in Italy, and court-martialed. He refused to blindfold, refused to kneel, and told the firing squad corporal, shoot straight, and then he gave the order to fire himself. Instantly goated. Next up, we have Czechia. Sure, there's Jan Žižka, the blind general whose dying wish was to have his skin made into drums so he could keep leading his troops. Absolute psychopathic legend, but the most iconic figure is Jan Hus. Hus was a priest and a theologian in the early 1400s who challenged the Catholic Church's corruption long before the Reformation had even begun. He preached in Czech, making religion accessible to ordinary people and calling for reforms like ending the sale of indulgences, promoting moral integrity among clergy, and empowering lay people. His ideas sparked a massive following and inspired the Hussite movement, which shaped Czech identity and culture for centuries. Of course, the church didn't like that. Hus was tried for heresy and burnt at the stake in 1415, but his death only cemented his status as a martyr and a symbol of Czech courage, conscience, and national pride. Even today, Hus is celebrated nationwide with a public holiday on the 6th of July, reminding Czechs every year of the man who stood up to authority and refused to back down. Next, we move on to Germany. Germany's an interesting case because as a country, it's only been around for a little over 150 years. Before that, it was a collection of smaller states with their own national heroes. As a collective though, we can maybe take a look at Rosa Luxemburg, who led the Spartacist uprising, or the 2014 World Cup team, but the most impressive is probably Otto von Bismarck. Bismarck probably doesn't seem like a hero in the usual sense. He didn't swing swords, charge into battle, or deliver rousing speeches to cheering crowds, and today he isn't really celebrated or has a national holiday like Jan Hus. But, using a mix of cunning diplomacy, nationalist rhetoric, and, yes, a bit of war, he diplomatically isolated and baited conflicts with the Danish, Austrians, and most famously the French in the Franco-Prussian War, each carefully timed to strengthen Prussia and humiliate their European rivals. By 1871, Bismarck had done the impossible, united Germany under Kaiser Wilhelm I, with him as the Chancellor. And he wasn't done there. He built the world's first modern welfare state. Old age pensions, accident insurance, health insurance, reforms passed in the 1880s that still influence many developed countries' modern social policies today. Except for the US, of course, but anyway, moving on. These weren't acts of charity, they were political weapons. By improving workers' lives, he undercut radical movements and kept society stable while maintaining elite support. Bismarck wasn't a hero in the romantic sense. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't adored by all, and he certainly wasn't gentle. But his brilliance lay in cold strategy, statecraft, and the ability to reshape a continent without ever stepping onto a battlefield. He united a fragmented patchwork of principalities into one of Europe's most dominant powers, and earned that title that still defines him, the Iron Chancellor. Next up, we have Hungary. Unlike many others on this list, István Széchenyi isn't the kind of national hero who led armies or staged dramatic uprisings. Instead, he's remembered as the visionary who pulled Hungary into the modern world. Born into a wealthy aristocratic family, he could have coasted through life and done the equivalent of being a nepo baby in the 1800s. Instead, he poured his fortune and energy into transforming a backward, semi-feudal Hungary into a modern European nation. After travelling through Europe and Britain in particular and seeing industry, steam power, and modern capitalism firsthand, Széchenyi returned determined to bring that same momentum home. He funded the Hungarian Academy of Sciences from his own money, championed railways and river regulation, modernised navigation on the Danube, and pushed through a construction of the Chain Bridge, which finally united Buda and Pest. He wrote a book called Hitel, which attacked outdated feudal practices and argued that Hungary's future depended on economic reform, education, and national self-confidence. Széchenyi wasn't a revolutionary, and he feared sudden upheaval would destroy Hungary, but his steady, methodical reforms laid the foundations for the country's 19th century national awakening. By the 1840s, people were already calling him the greatest Hungarian. Unfortunately, that same decade saw the outbreak of the Hungarian Revolution, and the relentless pressure of political crises and the turmoil of that said revolution took a heavy toll on him. Struggling with severe mental distress, Széchenyi tragically unalived himself in 1860. Even his political rival and adversary, Lajos Kossuth, who led the Hungarian Revolution, believed he really was truly the greatest Hungarian. Bro was so respected even in death for his achievements. Following Hungary, we get to Liechtenstein. Despite being a sleepy tax haven principality, its national hero isn't a bank or someone guessing its location on GeoGuessr. It's produced one or two figures who could pass as national heroes, and Prince Johann I Joseph is the closest of all. During the Napoleonic Wars, Johann emerged as a genuinely formidable commander, most notably leading over 4,000 Austrian cavalry at Austerlitz and eventually rising to Feldmarschall, the highest rank in the Austrian army. He was also entrusted with negotiating peace treaties with Napoleon, like the one that really pissed off Andreas Hofer, so I guess he had some diplomatic game up his sleeve as well. Considering he came from a country with about 6,000 people at the time, this is actually statistically quite impressive. Next is Poland. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Is Poland Central Europe? According to this map, sure, why not? Anyway, Poland's actually quite stacked with heroes given its turbulent history and its often unfortunate position on the map. With that in mind, one of its more modern national heroes is probably Józef Pilsudski. Pilsudski grew up in a country that had ceased to exist as an independent state for nearly a century, having been carved up by all of the empires surrounding it. From a young age, he immersed himself in revolutionary politics, joining the Polish Socialist Party and orchestrating daring actions against the Tsarist authorities. He spent time in prison and exile, but his vision never wavered, which was that of a free, sovereign Poland. During World War I, Pilsudski emerged as a master strategist of both statecraft and warfare. He formed the Polish legions under Austro-Hungarian command, carefully navigating alliances and leveraging the chaos of the war to Poland's advantage. In 1918, as empires crumbled and the map of Europe was being redrawn, Pilsudski returned to Warsaw and became the chief of state of the newly re-established Second Polish Republic. Perhaps his most celebrated moment came in 1920 during the Polish-Soviet War, when the Red Army threatened to overrun Poland and push westward into Europe. Pilsudski personally planned and led the counterattack that became known as the Miracle on the Vistula, which could be considered his magnum opus, to be honest. It was a decisive victory that preserved Poland's independence and saved Europe from Bolshevism, at least for another 25 years or so. He helped shape the country's early government and stabilized a nation emerging from over a century of partition. He later became president of Poland as well in the interwar period through a not-so-fun coup, becoming a bit authoritarian and making his legacy a bit more nuanced. He tried to secure the country's independence through alliances with France and a few other countries through an idea known as intermarium. More on that in this video here. Little plug. Pilsudski wasn't a hero in the conventional romantic sense. He was a revolutionary, a soldier, and a statesman who resurrected a nation from oblivion. For Poland, long oppressed and often overlooked, Pilsudski represents a national hero that restored Poland's place on the map. But his authoritarian nature and dictatorship following his coup in 1926 complicates his legacy. Some people even give him a 3 out of 10, so that's the sort of nuance that he could bring. Next, we have Slovakia. For Slovakia, Josef Gabčík stands out as the national hero whose story borders on legendary. Born in 1912 and raised in modest circumstances, he became a soldier, later fleeing Nazi-controlled Czechoslovakia to join the exiled forces in Britain. There, he was selected for Operation Anthropoid, the daring mission to assassinate Reinhard Heydrich, the Butcher of Prague and one of the most powerful, brutal figures in the Nazi regime. Heydrich has also been listed as one of the chief architects of the Holocaust in Europe, so yeah, a bit of a shit guy. On the 27th of May 1942, Gabčík stepped in front of Heydrich's open-top car and attempted to fire his Sten gun. The gun jammed, but instead of running, he held his ground, drawing Heydrich into an exposed position that allowed his partner Jan Kubiš to throw the bomb that fatally wounded him. It remains the only successful assassination of a top Nazi leader. Both Gabčík and Kubiš went into hiding, but were eventually cornered with the other paratroopers in a Prague church crypt, having been snitched on by one of their own countrymen for 1 million marks. Rather than surrender, they fought until the end, with Gabčík and the others unaliving themselves and Kubiš dying from his wounds as the Germans closed in. In response, the Nazis then went and massacred the inhabitants of the Czech town of Lidice as revenge for Heydrich's death, as it was believed that the townspeople were associated with hiding people in the operation, which they weren't. For Slovakia at least, as Kubiš was Czech, he represents courage against impossible odds, proof that even a small nation can deliver a blow against tyranny. Next is Switzerland. When people think of this famously neutral country, they don't usually picture national heroes. After all, Roger Federer and Swiss chocolate, while excellent, don't quite make the historical cut. The first name many do think of is William Tell, the legendary crossbowman who defied Austrian rule. But Tell is almost certainly a mythologized figure, more symbol than history. For a real documented Swiss national hero though, General Henry Dufour stands above the rest. Henry Dufour was a man who led federal forces during the Sonderbond War of 1847, a short but decisive Swiss civil conflict between the liberal Protestant cantons and a conservative Catholic alliance. Dufour's leadership was remarkable not just for securing victory and preserving the Confederation, but for the restraint he imposed. His insistence on humane conduct and the protection of civilians meant Switzerland avoided the bloodshed that marked so many European civil wars. This would lead to him helping to lay the foundations for what would become the International Committee of the Red Cross, an organization built on neutrality, humanitarianism, and the protection of human dignity. And while the Red Cross's history hasn't been without controversy, like a few little sneaky incidents of giving Nazi war criminals passports to escape to South America, the underlying vision was undeniably noble. In many ways, it was a profoundly Swiss idea, to build a neutral institution dedicated to relieving suffering in even the most politically fraught of circumstances. More on those escapes in this little sneaky video here. If you enjoyed this vid, feel free to check out a similar one on Balkan countries that I made as well, and see how people can interact respectfully with one another in the comments section about the status of Kosovo. And don't forget to sub as well. Enjoy, Kings.